Recording is to show you how to use LoggerPro to graph your data if you choose to do so. So once you open up LoggerPro, you'll get a blank data file, data set, as well as a blank graph. First thing you want to do is change the column headings to represent your data. So for example, if we do a position versus time graph, our x-axis or horizontal axis is going to have the time, so we're going to write the name in. We're going to give it a short name, T for time, and we're going to give it some units, and we're going to click Done. On the y-axis, we're going to put position, so we'll type in position. Our short name is going to be x, and then our unit for this lab is going to be centimeters. So you can see that it puts those names in, and you can also see that it also changes the titles of the axes itself. So once I start typing in data, and I'm just going to put in a few data points here, just for the heck of it. Oops, there we go. And then our position values, I'm just going to put in a few of these, maybe 5. I'm just going to count by even increments. So this actually will look more like a constant velocity graph. You'll notice the data points automatically start graphing, but they look kind of scrunched up. What we want to do is scale this axis to fit our data a little bit more appropriately. To do that, go up to the LoggerPro menu file, hit Analyze, and you go down to Auto Scale from 0. So what Auto Scale from 0 is going to do is going to properly scale our x and our y axes, but it's going to make sure that 0, 0 is in the bottom left-hand corner. So we can see, you can sort of see there's a little red data point right there, 0, 0, and then you have your other 2 points, and then our last data point is right there. So it goes to the much to the extremes. All right, to make a good graph, you're going to add a title to your graph. So double click anywhere on the graph, and you'll see graph options come up, and you want to click on the graph options, and you'll see a title bar, and you can type in the title of your graph, position versus time. If you want to add more lines, you can make it change colors or whatever you want to do, but that's it. So it comes up with the graph. Now we want to do a best fit line. So you have 2 options here in LoggerPro. There are 2 shortcut keys. There's one for a linear fit if you want to just see if it fits a straight line graph, and then there's a curve fit here if you think that it's more of a curved shape. Then you want to use a curve fit. So for example, I kind of know this is a linear fit because we're counting by 5, so we have the even increments. This kind of looks like the constant velocity. So if I just click on linear fit, well, it's pretty neat because this dialog box that comes up gives me the equation of the line, and it also tells me what my slope is, and it gives me the units of the slope because I typed the units in. So it's kind of a really helpful and useful tool. So I'm just going to show you how to transfer this into your Google Doc. So this is my graph. If I want to change, or my data table, if I want to change the size of my data table, I can kind of grab the edges of it and shrink it. As long as these little blue squares are on the outside, I can use my shortcut key and do a Command copy or Command C to copy it. And then I can just bring it over to my Google Doc, and I do a Command V to paste it in. And it didn't show up. That's good. Let's try that again. Oops. All right, so click on the graph. We'll hit Command C. There we go. And we'll bring it over here. Oops. And type it in, and there it is. And you can see that it's actually pretty large. So what you want to do for that is just kind of grab the edge of it and just shrink it down so it's not so huge anymore. And I probably could have made it a little bit smaller there. So I can put my data table in there, and you can wrap it in the text, and you can do some formatting things with that. All right, to copy the graph over, this part is kind of important. You want to grab your graph and shrink it down to kind of a nice proportion size, move the box out of the way so I can see the line, and same thing. Click on it so that it highlights these little blue squares, and then you hit the Command C to copy it. Bring it over to where it says to paste your graph in, and then you just hit a Command V to paste it in. Again, it's going to be pretty large. You can shrink it down a little bit. It's not so bad. But by the sheer act of kind of minimizing this, it makes the scaling on this graph, because otherwise I would not be able to read what it said over here, and I would not be able to read what was in this box. So this is just a neat way to do the LoggerPro. All right, so a couple of options that you might run into. I mentioned the couple things that we're going to look on, so I'm going to get rid of this fit. If my data turned out to be more curved and we want to look at the curve fit, click on that, and it gives you a bunch of options. So for 9th grade, there's only a couple that we're going to look at. Proportional would be kind of just a horizontal line. Linear, we looked at that. Quadratic is going to be the one that we would select if we thought it was curved. And then the only other one that we have a choice for is an inverse. So if we think it's an inverse relationship. So if I clicked on this quadratic and tried the fit, it kind of looks like a linear fit, but you can see that these values in front of the A and the C are a little weird because the data is just linear anyway. But if it is curved, try the quadratic and just get it to fit, and you follow the same directions. So we're going to hit cancel on that one. We're not going to do that. All right, so next, for the velocity versus time data, you might have more columns here. You might have one for the displacement interval distance. You'll have one for the interval or the velocity, and you might have one for the clock time that you're going to use. So you might need 3 columns in your data set, depending on how you want to do it. And you have an option how you want to do this. If you want to just put all the data in one data table and then just bring the velocity time data over here to graph it, that's fine. But if you want to do it all in one data table, that's good too. It's really up to you. I don't really care too much about that. So under the data, if I want to add an extra column, I can just add a new manual column because you're going to type them in by hand. So let's say this other one that we're going to do is velocity, and I'm going to give it a short name V, and the units are centimeters per second. That'll be done. So you have a velocity. This time might actually be our clock time now, so it'll be those kind of half interval numbers, 0.05 and then 0.15, and this would be 0.25, and then our position isn't going to be position anymore, it's going to be our displacement interval. The short name here, if I wanted to do delta x, I can do those Greek letters, and I can find a delta, lowercase, delta, where is it? Oh, upper, there it is, delta x. And then our units would be centimeter, and I hit done on that. So I can put those displacement intervals here, and then my velocity, let's just say it's 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm just making up some numbers here. So now, over on my graph, again, I would change the title to velocity versus time. And now I want to make sure that I'm graphing velocity and my time interval. So if I want to change this axis to velocity, all I have to do is hover over the name of it, and you can see that little gray box that shows up, and just double or single click on it, and then I can pick the column that I want. So if I've named it properly, velocity, then I can pick the velocity to be on that vertical axis, and the time I kept at the same name, so I have time on that axis. So it works out. And then I can do the same thing. I can do that curve fit or linear fit, and I want to make sure that I shrink the box down so that I can copy it over. So as far as the data set works, you can do this by hand in your Google Doc if you don't want to go through all this, and then just type in the 2 columns you need and bring the graph over. Or if you want to do it all in LoggerPro, that's fine too. If you have any questions, be sure to ask. It's very intuitive. Sometimes there's a couple things that I may have forgotten, so just ask.